Damn it! Did you ever hear a sound and think, oh my god, did I do something wrong? What did I do? What happened? Are you okay? Are they okay? Oh my god, I can't deal with them not being okay. Do you consider yourself an empath or an emotional sponge? Or maybe you've already identified yourself as codependent, or maybe you're fearful avoidant or some other insecure attachment style. Regardless, this is all in the same bucket of childhood survival strategies that are still a part of your life, that are still affecting you. Maybe somebody was expressing their discomfort under their breath. Maybe they were just complaining. Maybe they were banging the dishes. Maybe they were doing construction. Maybe they were doing something else. It could have been anything else, actually. And you picked it up. And now something's going on. You're hooked, otherwise known as a trigger. Well, listen up, because in this video, we're going to talk about specifically sound triggers, and what you can do about this. These sounds in our environment, such as the drilling upstairs, the thunderstorm, the ambulance outside, it is natural for us as humans and other animals to react to those noises. And in this case, our fear is beneficial to alert us that there might be danger around. What I will say is that you can become more grounded and less reactive around these types of sounds if you do sitting meditation every day. It helps to regulate your nervous system. And I'll get to that more later. In this video, what I'm mostly addressing here is these little sounds in your environment that are hooking you, that are expressed by other humans. Things that get you into the low drama triangle, for example, which I will address in a moment. The internet is filled these days with what I call the trend of the disempowered empath. I see it all over the message boards. I see it all over these videos online, that people consider themselves an empath or a highly sensitive person or whatever the next buzzword is these days. And what's going on is that they're taking on this label that they're an empath. And now that they have this label, it means that they're weak, that they're very sensitive, and these things upset them, and they need to protect themselves from these things. And this is reinforcing this weakness. When I started my recovery, it was just called codependency. That's what I went in for. We didn't have this term of empath going around so much in 2011. We didn't have this highly sensitive person label going around. Now, let me tell you, codependent is a label too. They're all labels. My question for you is, do you want to break out of this label? There's a little thing with labels that happens, is that often it starts to have this group think around it. And what happens when you have group think is that you start to take on all these characteristics that other people are identifying with, and it amplifies your feeling of inadequacy, for example. Or it starts to basically collect more and more low drama of other people expressing their discomfort with this. And it can be very easy to fall into the trap of being a victim of your circumstances. And I know, if some of you are watching this, that the word victim can be very triggering. I used to be very triggered by it too. I'm not going to address too much of that exact thing in this video, but it is a good topic for another one. But I will be addressing the victim thing here and there in this because it pertains to the low drama triangle, which I'm going to get to in a moment. There's nothing wrong or bad with being an empath. I personally have chosen to not attach myself to the label. The reason being, now I'm going to make this distinction, is because all of the definitions and all of the discussions around what an empath is, for me, I have seen that they're very disempowering. And when they're not disempowering, they're often inflating the ego. They're inflating it by making you feel special to be an empath, that you're superior of others who are not an empath. And this does not aid in your growth or transformation. Neither does it aid in mine. I personally have chosen to not take on the title of empath. The reason being because I have been studying empathy for many years now. And I will be honest, is that this I'm going to call it an old map of empathy, has never aided me in my evolution or transformation. Perhaps in the future, I will be able to provide you with a new map of empathy. But for now, I have chosen to not take on that label. Instead, my evolution entailed me becoming a space holder. And when you are a space holder, in order to hold space, you cannot get hooked. It is inevitable, though, that something will hook you in some space in time. No one is a perfect space holder, and I've gotten to learn that every day on my journey, that there are other things to discover, triggers along the way, hooks, if you may, things that are in my reality that are there for me to take as an opportunity to grow. Would you like to take the things that are in your reality that are disturbing you, that are hooking or triggering you, and alchemize them? Everything in your reality is an opportunity for growth, is there for you if you so choose to use it. What if I told you that your evolution is now? What if I told you that those survival strategies that kept you safe, those survival strategies that are working against you, could be transformed into some of your greatest gifts? Because that is what has happened for me. Do I believe that you as an empath or highly sensitive person have a calling to be a space holder? Not necessarily. It's only for you if you choose to be. It doesn't mean you have to be. For me, I know I came into the world to be one. And it has become more and more empowering on my journey to be utilizing the hooks and to be learning to unhook myself from them, so that I can hold more and more space, so that I can be less reactive, and that I can have access to my feelings in the moment and what to do with them. In the trend of the disempowered empath, or the disempowered highly sensitive person, or here's another one, the disempowered introvert, because that's another one going around, which, by the way, not all introverts are people who view themselves as weak and hate people and all of this. I have met many introverts who actually have very large circles of friends and are very empowered. There are all kinds of stories going around. There are all kinds of stories that the collective of empaths in humanity has ingrained over time. Things like, oh my God, I can't be around all these people. This disempowerment, what are the operations of this disempowerment that's going on? Let's unpack them. First, we have all of these stories that have come up that have been ingrained over time. And now, like I said, we're on the internet where people are coming together and expressing all these different stories and relating with one another. Nothing wrong with this. Sometimes this is a part of our healing process, is to know that we are not alone in this. And no, indeed, we are not. But what I also see happening is not just these stories coming up of, oh my God, I can't be around people, I'm just sensitive, I don't like those things, I can't be there because I'm an empath. There is this, I'm weak, I'm too weak to do with this. I don't belong here. There can be all kinds of negative core beliefs that are running in the background in conjunction with these stories. And then what happens is you go into the low drama triangle and you feel like you are a victim, There are other roles, and we're going to get into those next. But you feel like you're a victim of your circumstances. And when you feel like a victim, you feel disempowered. And now what happens is that there can be this mechanism going off that in order to make yourself not feel like you're less than, is you start gratifying. Your ego starts gratifying the being of an empath. I see it all the time online. People want to feel special now for being an empath because it means that you at least are not a narcissist. Because so many empaths are afraid of being a narcissist. And why is that? Because when you're an empath who's disempowered, you are getting off on the belief that you are sensitive, that you have this superpower to detect what's going on around you. And I know that this cuts deep, because I think if I were to watch this video maybe when I was early on my healing journey, I would have been pissed off at me maybe. It would have triggered me. Yeah, it would have. Because I wasn't willing to accept yet what I was doing. I needed to stay disempowered for all those years to really learn what this was about, apparently. It took more and more years of spiritual practice for me to awaken to see that no matter how evolved you get, the ego is still there as your sparring partner. Gives us a good example of what maybe we don't want to be like. And this spiritual ego can be very, very tricky because it will use anything we care about especially, to inflate ourselves with. What is the ego's function? Well, there are many, but it doesn't want to be weak. It doesn't want to be wrong ever because it's painful. But the process of growth involves vulnerability. It involves going through the pain. So now I want to address the feelings and emotions that come up. When you react to a sound in your environment, maybe all day long, you're picking up on sounds, and by the end of the day, you're drained, and you feel weak, and you feel like there's something wrong with you, or whatever story you've got going on. What is it? Pop me a comment below, because these, once again, you're not going to be alone in this. There are many of the same beliefs going on, and potentially infinite stories around them. When an animal hears a sound, it can go into 4 different types of reactions. These are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. In fight reaction, we do exactly what it sounds like. We fight. For example, my father's dominant reaction is to fight. Immediately, that is his way of protecting himself. And he was always reacting very strongly and unconsciously to the sounds around him. If we just dropped a glass or something as a kid, he would slam his fist down on the table and yell, "Damn it!" And it was so frightening to me and my brothers that it would just freak us out. Until this day, the brother that I'm still close to, he and I have talked about how these sounds are still sometimes triggering, or that we had to heal past these sounds. And till this day, there are little remnants that come up that remind us of this, and that we misinterpret for something that maybe isn't what happened then. We'll get into that in a moment about assumptions. So we've got this fight response. Then we have the flight response. An animal might do this in the wild, for example. When a predator comes, they may take their chances and beeline it out of there as fast as they can to protect themselves. In another case, an animal may instinctually freeze, play dead. Maybe you did this a lot as a child. I did this all the time as a child. I froze up. In fact, I lived in a state of dissociation for so many years that it took me It was around 8 years of my healing journey to start coming out of it. It was a very gradual progression. And then once I started to really learn some tools, which I will share with you in this channel, and regulate my nervous system, I started to come out of dissociation more and more and more, to the point that I do not live in it anymore. It's very rare that it comes up. Sometimes it comes up during my moon time when I'm feeling this fatigue, and I'm using dissociation instinctually as this self-soothing mechanism. And I remind myself to come out of that and return to the present moment, that I am safe right now, or that I choose to be in the present moment. An animal in the wild will go into the freeze response and take their chances of playing dead. That way, when a predator comes up to them and sniffs around, they think, ugh, that doesn't look like good, tasty meat to me, and they go on their way. And that animal may survive in the wild. We may do this a lot. Maybe we were sexually abused. I was. You're not alone in this, okay? And for some of us, we go into that dissociation response, that we leave our body. This is super common for people who have been sexually abused or just abused in general. And then there is that fourth response, the fawn response. This one is not always talked about in all of the literature, but it's very important because we do this. This is the type of people-pleasing that goes on. In fact, you could even consider that animals do this as well. And I know this is going to be a very edgy one for me to express, because not everybody is willing to accept this, that some animals have given up their center in exchange to be given food. Maybe they've given it up to humans that do not treat them well, but they need that food to continue to survive. So they fawn, they appease their abuser. And this happens, as you know, to humans as well. Were you abused growing up? I was. And you can go into this fawn response where you are doing anything possible to keep yourself as safe as possible. And sometimes that means going along chronically over years and years to what this other person wants, dictates, whatever. In fact, you can think about this on a societal level and see that people do this all the time. People give up their center to the government, to religion, to the authorities, to the news, you name it, to their partners, to their children, instead of staying grounded in their center. If you've given your center away, it's yours. Take it back. I welcome you to doing so. And if you want more about the centering process, go to the video that I've made on it, linked above, and you can use that practice every day, all day long, immediately when you notice that you have given up your center to something. It may seem basic AF, but it works, and it helps you to stay unhooked. Now I want to go back to the feelings. What happens when you have these reactions and these stories that you're too weak and that you're a disempowered empath, or you're collecting energy and you're drained and all of this, and you can't stand that you feel these feelings of fear, that you are this weakling. Not only are you judging yourself, you're judging the feelings or emotions that are just there to serve you. In modern culture, you've been conditioned, I have been conditioned to suppress your feelings and emotions. There is a distinction that I am going to make now about feelings and emotions. So listen to this, because this is revolutionary information, discoveries that took me many years to discover with other space holders. And when I did, it was so transformative for my journey. Feelings arise in the moment. There are 4 of them: anger, sadness, fear, and joy. They arise in the moment, and they're for handling things in the moment. They give you information for that moment. They stick around for about 3 minutes at most. For example, a noise may go off and you may run to protect yourself, to get out of maybe incoming danger. What feeling is that? Fear, right? And you will use your fear. It would probably be an unconscious fear in this case, but you may use it, and you may use it consciously once you become conscious that comes up as unconscious fear, to go and protect yourself. In a case of somebody maybe expressing their discomfort in another room, maybe you hear them huffing and puffing, you may go out there, you may choose to go out there and be like, hey, what's going on? And it may be very scary to go and approach them, but maybe it's better to go and ask for clarity from a space of love than to just sit over here and assume that you caused them the suffering, or what you assume is them suffering, in another room. Do you follow? I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm going to go into assumptions next. Now you could have something like anger come up. Anger is also dismissed in our society. It is judged as being dangerous, for example, or destructive and scary. But actually, if you didn't have any anger, you would be a total pushover. You would have no boundaries. Anger lets us declare something. When we use it consciously, we can become amazing at expressing and honoring our boundaries. Now, that's just a couple of things about the feelings. What happens when feelings are suppressed or resisted or not really used in the moment is they fester and they turn into emotions. Emotions form after feelings linger around for 3 minutes or more. And what happens when you're a child, let's say, and you grow up in this household that's very dysfunctional? I'm going to paint you a picture of mine, but pop me a comment below about yours if you'd like. I'll hold some space for it. You grow up in this household that's very dysfunctional. There's a lot of violence going on in it all the time. And your parents are not able to co-regulate with you. They are not able to co-regulate with you because they cannot even self-regulate with themselves. So of course, we can blame them all we want, but they didn't really know how to do it themselves, okay? And what happens is when you are crying and you are sensitive as a child, maybe they were telling you that you're too sensitive and you need to keep a stiff upper lip more. And boys don't cry, maybe they told you, or that you're having another mood swing. That's what would happen to me a lot. Of course I was having a mood swing because I was being abused by someone. And of course I was reacting. Now I was going from this sensitive fear response to the anger reactivity of trying to defend myself. All kinds of things were going on. And instead of having space held for me and a parent who would co-regulate and be like, what do you feel? I feel angry. You feel anger, and really being there and not reacting to it and inviting those feelings into the space and not judging them and telling me they were wrong. I was told that they were wrong, that they weren't welcome. And so over time, these emotions, they stuck around, and every time that something would come up that would trigger it, it was coming up to be healed. Emotions are for healing. They're for healing. What do you think of this distinction? Tell me below, because this is revolutionary work and it's not very known in the world. This is the world of possibility management, which I will talk more about on this channel here and there. This is the world of next culture that we are initiating into the world. It is the culture that happens after matriarchy and patriarchy have run their course. There are different maps for emotions and feelings in possibility management. Now imagine when the next hook arrives for you, can you invite it? Can you hold more space for it? Knowing that it is a message for you, that it has information, that it's something to be healed. Let me tell you a little something. It is essential for you to practice it on your own, but for years and years and years, I was doing this work on my own. I was holding as much space as I could on my own. And what I learned, and I feel a feeling of joy and sadness in my heart right now as I say this. Because I was going at this from a lone wolf perspective or strategy, I should say. I was going at this from this hyper independent survival strategy, a remnant of the past. And then when I found other space holders, the process of holding space transformed enormously for me, because it is one thing to hold space for ourselves and foster compassion within and expand our capacity. And it is another for someone else to do that with you. Because sometimes it is too hard for us to hold space. Now, I'm not saying to outsource your growth and directly go to someone else. It is good to first start within. And then when you notice that you cannot get unhooked and it is an emotion, that's when you go to a space holder. Reach out to me if you'd like, who can hold space for this process, for maybe a listening space, or if it's an emotion that's locked in there since childhood, you can go through an emotional healing process. And let me tell you, I started doing these once or more a week for weeks on end, consecutively. And the transformation was massive to the point that I do warn you, I typically have perfect skin. People envy my skin. I eat really clean and maybe I just have good genetics too. Not bragging, but I have had so many blemishes and things since I started doing these processes. Because why? Because the body keeps score. Because it's all stored in there. And I'm sure that when I get to a place that a lot of these things have come up and I have processed them from my adult state, which is taking responsibility for these feelings, radical responsibility for these feelings, that I'll probably not have as many of them coming up. Are you ready for your transformation is what I want to say, is that there is so much power in this when you become less reactive, when you are able to, instead of run from a trigger with another that you think is happening with another person, that you're able to actually use your fear and go and approach them from a place of love and more clear communication. Now let's go into a sound hook or trigger that is something like maybe you heard someone sighing under their breath. This is one that used to happen to me all the time. I would hear somebody expressing some kind of discomfort, maybe unconsciously, and I would get triggered. I would think that I did something wrong. I would personalize it, as it's called. I would go to assumptions. I was too afraid to even use my fear I didn't even know these practices of using your fear consciously to begin with back in those days. And I would just not say anything, but I would harbor this in. And all these little instances would connect all day long. I would keep on stuffing them. And it was a very, very painful way to live. I was living in a perpetual state of reactivity within. I feel fear right now because this topic in and of itself is expansive. And I know that we're already past 25 minutes of this video, maybe it's up to 30. And I feel fear because a rescuer part of me that still is there wants to really give you all the gold. But there's more and more and more gold to be discovered in this. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the low drama triangle, which is what I would go into and what you are going into a lot when you hear these sounds and you react to them. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong? Is my partner upset with me? They're not expressing something. Maybe that's what your parent did or parents did when you were a child. You heard them unconsciously expressing their feelings and you personalized it. That because your dad is huffing and puffing maybe, that you did something wrong. And that is natural. That is what happens. We develop this survival strategy. And the survival strategy is to keep us safe, that any little noise we're going to know before it ever even comes into the room, we're going to know. And we're going to protect ourselves. And let me tell you, this is something that's so deep rooted that this is actually part of attachment theory. I don't want to go too far on the attachment theory wavelength here, but even babies can sense what their mother is feeling when their mother is in another room. This is how deep this stuff goes. But I'll offer you some motivation that this can all be healed and transformed. And when you do, yes, it is painful as we label it, but there is so much joy over time of the process of becoming more empowered. It really has all the feelings in it, in my opinion, in my experience, really. There's sadness in it. There's fear of doing this. There's anger for this. And there's joy. And the joy of the process that you are healing your child within. You are becoming more of an adult and taking this responsibility. Which, let me tell you about low drama triangle. The low drama triangle is all about not accepting responsibility. So let's say you got this trigger coming up and somebody is complaining under their breath. Now you've got this whole thing wired in that you did something wrong from your childhood. This is an emotion coming up, actually. And when this is going on, you are going into one or a flip-flop of 3 roles. You may start out in the victim. Oh my God, what did I do wrong? Something's wrong with me. Why does this keep happening to me, etc. You're the victim. You're powerless. There's nothing you can do about this. This is just you. You're an empath, blah, blah, blah. Now maybe you start going into the rescuer role. And this role is saying, it's okay. You're just an empath. It just means that you're sensitive. You have a heart of gold. It's trying to coddle you, make you feel better about this. This can even turn into this egoic glorification, which, let me tell you, a lot of healers, when they become spiritual and they're on this path of healing, they go into their ego gets very superior about this. And it's like, well, I'm a healer. I'm an empath. At least I sense the sounds around me and I can read other people. And it can go on this high horse about it, actually. Yes, your fear can let you scan people over if you practice this conscious fear. But going about this from a low drama triangle, it's just feeding your ego. And when your ego gets fed, you actually cannot show up in a state of empowerment and you cannot hold space. What else can happen when you hear this trigger of this sound is maybe you react and you feel angry and you're going into this persecutor role, which is like, gosh, do they always have to do this? Why are they flying off the handle? Maybe you're angry that they're angry even. It could be any kind of reaction of anger coming up, of unconscious anger to blame them. For example, I could be really angry about how they're drilling up above and go into this low drama triangle that, well, it's not my fault I can't film this video today because everyone's going to judge me because they're going to hear the drilling going off and it's their fault that they're, like I could do all kinds of things, let's say. You can flip-flop between all these roles and go back and forth, actually. For example, when I was growing as a coach, I started to notice that there was a rescuer in me that wanted to give so much to other people. It wanted to fix them. It wanted to take them out of their pain and their suffering, or what I perceived or even projected onto them was their suffering, was my suffering. Projections are a sticky situation. Now, I would give a lot, and then maybe when somebody wasn't receptive to it, the persecutor in me would go off and be like, next time they'd come around and they would maybe complain or vent or something, which is also low drama. Nothing wrong, by the way, with low drama, but we'll get into that next. They would complain or blame or do some other low drama thing, and then the persecutor in me would go, well, maybe if you took my suggestions, you wouldn't be as hooked. Does this make sense to you? We've gone really far into this. Pop me a comment below. I'll make another video on different things. But so you can flip-flop around. There are countless and countless things that go on in the low drama triangle. And this is the stuff of ordinary life. We are constantly going into low drama. But over time and practice, we can get out of low drama. And this is where it really helps to do this in a community of people that are all committed to being vulnerable, of sharing when they got hooked. This is what I do with other space holders. I got hooked today. This is what happened. It landed in this part of me, and et cetera, and actually celebrating our hooks. Because what happens when you don't celebrate your awarenesses is that you can easily go into shame, feel shame, and get stuck in shame. Shame is also an emotion to be processed and taken responsibility for and felt. Pop me a comment below and tell me what's the latest low drama trigger that came up in you. What happened and what was your reactivity? Share your story below. Now I want to go into assumptions. What happens when we have a trigger come up, say it's a noise trigger, is we may go into an assumption about that noise. For example, you're in this room, and in that room is the kitchen. Somebody is making some noise with the dishes in the sink. You remember that, oh, I didn't really do the dishes. Was it their turn to do the dishes? I don't know. Maybe it was my turn. We haven't really been keeping tally of it. Are they angry that I didn't get to them? That there's a sink full of dishes? You may be going to all kinds of conclusions and interpreting the sound of the dishes as them being upset with you and not expressing, not actually coming and communicating with you. Hey, I feel sad and a little bit angry that you didn't do the dishes. It was your turn to do them, and I feel like you let me down on a promise. Will you do them? That's an example of clear communication done with coming and being vulnerable with your feelings first. When we speak from our feelings first, we are able to invite the other person to receive them. In the case of maybe it wasn't your turn to do the dishes, but you heard them clattering around and maybe you're personalizing that the person is upset, you may want to go and ask for clarity. You may want to go into your fear, and you may say something like, hey, I felt a little bit scared when I heard the dishes clattering around, not blaming them. I heard the dishes clattering around. And I had the idea that maybe you were angry about having to do them. Is this true? Maybe the person will say, oh no, I don't feel angry at all. But you may be able to just go and ask for some clarity on this. For example, I live with my brother, and we've bonded a lot over the years, especially over our childhood trauma, and we've actually gotten to heal a lot of it collectively together. In going and sharing something that happened from the past and how we have been able to not come out of the assumption and clarify together. So in this case, recently I heard the banging when I was filming. Actually, it was in the sink, and I didn't know if it was my turn or not to do these dishes. And I didn't know, is he just like angry that he has to do them? So I went out there and I checked, and he was like, no. And I'm like, okay. And then I said, do you ever feel angry about having to do them when we've left them in the sink, or it's your turn to do them or something? And he said, no. And I was like, okay, it's just a projection then, because I've done that before, I said. Sometimes when we've left them, I've been a little bit frustrated that I didn't want to do them. And I noticed myself banging them around a bit out of frustration. So the whole time, I was assuming that he was angry about doing the dishes was actually me projecting my past anger about doing the dishes. So we have assumptions and we have projections. It's an interesting world of intimacy now, isn't it? Or we could say intimacy blockers. You may be living your life all day long, making assumptions about the noises and other things going on around you. And let me tell you, often these are not true. Yes, I know that can be a hard thing to accept, because for years, I really got off on the idea that I was the person who could smell a rat from far. Yeah, people used to tell me that I could smell a rat from far and that I sensed it first. And I was really afraid, actually, of giving up my survival strategies, because I thought that I wouldn't be able to protect myself if I couldn't detect all the little things going on around me. But doing that all day long is very disempowering, actually. And when you heal, you actually begin to balance yourself, and you begin to ground, and you begin to advocate for your needs and clearly communicate more. And when you do, you realize that a lot of the assumptions that you had were actually false. I know, it's very hard to accept. But when I started really healing in my 8th year, like shedding a lot of traumas and really becoming more of a clear communicator, advocating for my needs and boundaries, asking more for clarity, questioning my stories, rewiring these subconscious beliefs like I am bad, reprogramming those deep-seated ones, I discovered again and again and again that I was often not correct. I wasn't correct. But what happened was, it all came crashing down, and there was a lot of sadness for this, that I had lived my life in not only this haze, but in this agitated survival state that made life so difficult to live. So difficult. And I also became less confused, and my relationships transformed and got better and better. And here's the thing, this is a work in progress. This is a lifelong practice, okay? I am not the guru on the mountain, and the days of the guru on the mountain are over. I know there's a lot of people who come online here and they act like they're an expert at everything. And I just think that this is coming from a place where people aren't, they're not coming from their vulnerability on here. They're not, they're afraid to be. They want to be an expert and they want to be respected and admired. But maybe this is my assumption from what I see. Or a projection of my own fears. Now, I want to recommend a couple of things that you can choose to do. There are some possibilities for you to transform. The first one is to meditate. Meditate every day. Make it a practice as often as you can. Really show up to do it daily. If you can't do 20 minutes yet, start with 5. But I will say that when you get up to 20 to 25 minutes is where things really start to shift. You shift a little bit more into compassion. The ego and the mind starts to kind of tire out a little bit. So it can take a while, but showing up every single day, what will happen in meditation is, well, a number of things, but I will address a few here. You may start off with going into emotions and stories and worries and ruminations from the past. They will all come at you and you will have to watch them. What we're really doing in meditation is we're being with and we're becoming the witnesser of these things. But if you're a beginner at meditation, you will get stuck in them. You will get hooked basically by your own mind, by things that aren't even going on anymore. They're not even going on outside of you maybe. And they are all happening here. And you are getting involved in them. In meditation, you choose to have an object of meditation. This can be anything, really. Anything can be a meditation and anything can be an object of meditation. And in this case, maybe it's your breath. It's a common object of meditation. You continue to keep going back to your breath, but it is inevitable that you will be watching the stories that are coming up in you. They could be ruminations like, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't said that. All kinds of like victim modes and victim mentality going on. And then you will see that there's the persecutor going on in your head, maybe like, well, if you didn't do that, maybe if you weren't so stupid, maybe if you weren't persecuting you. And then maybe it'll flip-flop over to the rescuer like, that's not very nice, now is it? If you had a little bit more compassion, then maybe you could, in trying to rescue the victim. And this can be going on all in your mind, this low drama triangle. Look, there's nothing wrong or bad about low drama, by the way, again. It is just the way that the mind works in our conditioning. Becoming the witnesser lets us step out of it and watch it and become aware of it. And the more that you practice becoming aware, you become more and more aware quicker. You become more mindful. And when you commit to meditating and sitting on the cushion and doing this every day, it also snowballs to doing it when you're off the cushion. There really is no substitution for sitting on the cushion. While anything can be a meditation in the present moment, like really being present while you're washing the dishes, let's say, there is still no substitution for sitting meditation because it is so boring that if you can do sitting meditation, everything else is easier. Another thing that happens with meditation in terms of sounds is that you may hear the sounds going on around you. This happened to me all the time when I started meditating. I would hear sounds in the building where I lived. That building had a lot of little creaks and sounds, and it sounded like people were dragging furniture and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes something would drop. And when it dropped, I would feel that the fear come up in me and that vibration of the thing that dropped. And it was very much startling to my nervous system. My nervous system was conditioned to be startled extra than maybe people who didn't grow up in a household where there was a lot of violence going on. Now, what will happen, sometimes you may say, well, I don't startle at everything, maybe because you're dissociating, which was my defense mechanism or survival strategy, to dissociate all the time and not feel those feelings. And it is a process of healing to be actually letting yourself feel your way through these feelings and be like, yes, yes. Feeling it and welcoming it, not resisting it, okay? That's avoidance, and what we resist persists until we process it or feel it and welcome it. And listen, if you do this longer, I want to guarantee to you, but you'll have to pop me a comment below if you become a regular meditator. For me, what happened is that I started to regulate my nervous system. Also, going out in nature as often as possible does too. I'll have to insert that in here. But this started to regulate my nervous system to the point where I'm not startled all the time by noises. There may be little remnants here and there, but I'm grounded, and I'm grounded in a way that it's night and day from where I was. Now, the last tool that I'm going to recommend is to actually go up to the person who may be expressing some kind of distress or something that you're reacting to and ask for clarity or ask what's going on. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, especially if you've come from a certain programming like ones that I already outlined. And this is not a definitive video on this because this is a lifelong practice. As I said, this is a practice of intimacy. You actually use your fear. You use your fear consciously to let yourself connect with another person. And you come about this from a place of love and vulnerability. I already gave one earlier about going up and saying, hey, about the dishes, I feel sad and a little bit angry that you didn't do the dishes when that was what we agreed on, and I feel sad and angry because you didn't honor your promise. Now, here's the thing. The approach of doing this can be different with different people, and there will be fears, especially if you grew up in a certain home, that when you show up and you say that I feel this way or that way, that someone may react, that this may trigger them. And yes, this can happen with people who are, I'm gonna throw this word out there, even though it is being used a lot these days, narcissists. It's being used a lot to point blame and fingers at someone else instead of actually taking responsibility and doing your own work. I see this happening a lot these days. And let me tell you, when you become better and better at advocating for your needs and communicating from a true vulnerable place and a place of love, that you may even be able to do this around some people who are narcissists and keep your center while doing so. I have personally been able to do that in the past, where my father, for example, several years ago, he said, I was not a bad father. And I said, that's not what I was saying. I never said that you were a bad father. What I said was that I feel sad and I felt abandoned. And I know that you and mom, like I gave some understanding. I know that you and mom had this happen, but this is how I felt. And when I owned my feelings, instead of blaming, I owned them and I expressed how I felt, his reactivity just came down. And actually, he was able to go into this place where he understood my feelings and softened. This was enlightening, okay? This whole memory is like one stored in my memory box of a success. A success that could have gone in a direction that wouldn't have been so healing, right? Listen, there are some people who are never going to take responsibility, who are never going to really heal or transform. Do you want to be one of those people or not? You know, it's your choice, right? This isn't for everyone. Taking radical responsibility of your feelings and emotions requires this determination. I want to say, if I can do it, you can do it. It is a possibility. And this can go into a very long other conversation about how we encounter, how we approach people who are more self-centered, we'll say, and not very in touch with conscious feeling. So I would say, if you're starting out on this, to gauge who you're going to approach, right? Practice with someone who is more receptive to receiving you vulnerably, who will receive your invitation and also be vulnerable. And maybe they will return that and say, oh gosh, I didn't do the dishes yet, and I feel embarrassed, or I feel sad that I didn't do them yet, and now I feel angry that I didn't do them yet, so I'm gonna go do them. Another thing is to go slow when you're communicating. When you rush, when you try to defend yourself or you blame, it cuts communication. When you go slow, you open the space to being more of a neutral space where vulnerability can come in from both sides. Check in with yourself also. Are you really ready? Are you willing to have this conversation with someone. And if you're so panicked and you're not, maybe it is a time to first process your emotions. And then maybe you will have a more regulated nervous system to go and do it next time. This is once again, not a definitive video. It's very long. If you've reached the end, I thank you for coming into the space. I invite you to another video and pop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like the video, like it. If you want to stay connected, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.